Exploring the human journey.
I was 3 years old when I had a near-death experience, and during this experience, I fell into a tank filled with frigid water. So I went from a state of absolute shock, like what is going on, and having the feeling that I couldn't breathe, to suddenly a state of absolute peace, joy, calm. I experienced the most amazing state of well-being. Suddenly, I saw a body suspended in the water. And somehow, I knew that that was my body. And somehow, I also knew that I had the free will not to go back to it. So I turned around and simply left. At that point, I just started to experience the sense of absolute silence. And from there, in just an instant like that, I appeared in my mom's path. And when I saw my mom, I said, "Oh, that's Mom." She was about 10 minutes away from home. She had to walk. At that precise moment when I said, "That's Mom," my mom stopped in her track and she said, "Something is happening at home." She felt that something was going wrong with one of her babies, and she didn't even hesitate for a minute. She turned around and started to run back home. But at that moment, I was so amazed by the realization that wherever I put my mind, I could go. It was like time and space had vanished, and I could be anywhere at any time. I appeared in a realm that was completely made of pure, bright, shiny light. And at that moment, I felt absolutely welcome. I was home. I've been here already so many times. It was the realization that this was not the first time. And at that moment, I started to dissolve. I started to feel like I was just one with the whole. I am a being of light. And while I was in this state of absolute bliss, my mom, who was running back home, finally got there. And she directed herself to the back of the house where my oldest sister, it's amazing because everything had purpose. The purpose of my sister was for my mom to know that I was in this tank. I was playing with my sister when I fell into this tank, and my sister said to my mom, my sister is there and I cannot get her. My mom jumped in the tank, got me out. She knew CPR because these are all the synchronicities in life. She started to blow air, she started to revive me. I came back, and it was the sense of being vacuumed back, being sucked back, and it's like something I couldn't stop. But it's amazing how we're never left alone in this path, and how the help that we need somehow will come.
Hi and welcome. I'm so glad you joined us today. Our special guest is Dr. Ingrid Honkala, and we are going to have such a good time talking about consciousness, talking about near-death experiences, and all sorts of fun stuff. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's such a blessing and an honor to be with you guys here today. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you are welcome.
Now, we have to give a special shout out to our friend Melinda Presley. Thanks, Mel, for giving us the connection.
Yes.
She saw you at an IANS conference and got talking. She said, "Oh, you got to talk to Dave and Gail and come and share your human experience." So shout out to Mel.
Yeah, we love you, Mel.
We love you. So now I want the audience to know that you have this wonderful book. That's the introduction that I've had to your life experience. A Brightly Guided Life. This is how a scientist learned to hear her inner wisdom. It's a great book. It's really well documented, your journey, your path, your consciousness, and In here, you talk about your near-death experience. You talk about the beings of light and how we're never alone. We're always connected. And there's so much depth in here. Number one, I give you gratitude for sharing your story with the rest of us so we can learn from your experience.
This is incredible because I actually never thought about writing this book. Because at some point I thought, writing about me? It's kind of egotistic. That was my idea.
Wow.
But then when the time came, like this is all about timing. When the right time came and I just wrote, actually I fell into deep depression at some point in my life because I became so disconnected to my authentic self because I didn't want to be this. I was like, I want to be like everybody else. I was afraid of.
Now, when you said I didn't want to be like this, what was this to you?
For me, this was like, I don't want to be different. I don't want to see things others don't see. I don't want to feel that I don't belong. I felt, since I was very little, I felt that I didn't fit in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well,
And it happened since I was very little because I will say things and people will go like, what are you talking about?
mm-hmm.
Because I have all this clarity and I have all this awareness and I would just say things that people would just like, what are you talking about? So I had to learn to, I cannot talk about these things. And and little by little, I realized that I don't fit in this world. I don't fit in this world. So I grew up having that sense of, I'm not like the other ones.
So did you shut down that part of you for a while, or did you just decide, I just can't talk about it, but it continued to go on for you?
I guess in the core of my being, I always was who I was. I would say that awakened spiritual person I am, I always was that, but I closed that to view. So I wanted just to be normal. And I started to actually be like, oh, let's just act like the rest.
Mm-hmm.
How can I copy the other? Like I call it the chameleon personality.
Yeah.
How can I just copy
It's
others?
like you're trying to shut down the consciousness that you'd already attained.
Yeah.
Because you just kind of wanted to fit in.
So for like the first 19 years of my life, I was just immersed in spirituality completely. But when it was time to go to college, I was like, you know what? I want to be like everyone else. I want to have friends. I want to have a boyfriend. I want to party. I want to do the things that others do. My sisters, I had 3 sisters. Now boys were starting to come to the house and I was like, I was always quiet, always in my space. I started to, I want to be like them.
It's like, what was wrong with Ingrid?
Yes. And my oldest sister was like, no. You cannot be like this. Look, this is makeup, this is music, this is boys, this is parties. And she was always trying to bring me to this realm while I was floating in the upper realm of spirituality. So after that, when I finally made the decision, I want just to be like everyone else, is when a time in my life came where I lowered my vibrational energy. So it needed to happen because I was vibrating at a very high energy frequency. Yeah. So it reached a time where I told the beings of light, actually, I said to them, I want, like, people ask me, how could you walk away from them? It's like they became like my parents. So it's when you reach that time of your life where you're at in your teenage years and now you're ready to leave home.
Wow.
And the parents will never go away. You know, they are like a call away from you, but you want to do your own thing. Yeah. So I told them pretty much I want to go.
We saw in the feature video, we saw the piece, how you talk about your near-death experience as a very small child. You remember being absent from your body. And then at some point, as you're connected and you begin to integrate back into, well, I'm here, you see beings of light. Talk about kind of that first time you recognized them and how that's been part of your journey, is incorporating having communication with your guides, your beings of light.
Yeah. What happened is that there was a moment in my life after the near-death experience and all this happened that I couldn't find the way to really feel connected with my parents, with myself, with my name, with this realm. And I started to really suffer. And it started to affect my ability to eat, to relate with others, to do just anything. And so, like I mentioned in at the beginning in that video, was like we're never alone.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a moment in my life when I started to have these out-of-body experiences and access to this realm that was very similar to the realm of the light I experienced when I nearly died. And in this realm of the light, when I first saw these beings that I recognized as beings, because I saw myself as a being of light.
Beautiful, yeah.
When my NDE happened. So, and it's when I also realized that that's the presence I sensed when I died, when I was in this light. And I just like, oh, this is home. So every time I was in the presence of these beings, I always felt that I was so loved, so welcome, so warm, so incredibly well, that I just healed. It was joy. So they, after I saw a being of light for the first time in one of these journeys, one day I was just taking a shower and I was relaxing, because water for me, incredibly, although I drowned, which we could think is a very, very horrid experience of drowning.
Right.
Water became to me the way to go deeper.
Oh.
So it was absolutely the opposite effect. Instead of like feeling that
you
I
think
should
you'd
be
be like
scared of it.
afraid of
Fear,
it.
Like, yeah.
It was
Like it would trigger you, or
it was the complete opposite thing. Like, this brought me to the light.
Yeah, because that was your pathway, wasn't it?
So I became very close to water.
Isn't that
That's why I'm a diver, an
Yeah.
oceanographer, marine scientist. So water was like going to the deep.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I was taking a shower one day, like, just relaxing there, and a blue shiny light appeared in the bathroom. And it was, and at that point I knew this is a being of light. It's like, now I started to see them in this realm too. And at the beginning they didn't say or do anything, but nothing was needed, just their presence.
Yeah.
But there was a time where I was still so disconnected with my persona and with my name that I will throw tantrums.
That's right. You talk about in the book how you're like, why are you calling me Ingrid? That's not my name.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they one night they just kept call me for dinner, whatever, and I'm like, stop calling me like that. That is not my name.
Did you know what your name is?
Oh, that's when it comes the good part. Because they said, okay, so what is your name? And I said, I do not need one.
And I can just see you crossing your arms and stamping your foot.
I do not need one. So that's when the beings of light talked to me for the first time. And it was amazing, because now it was not just a presence, but I hear it was a voice. Oh, wow.
So they're like, okay, this girl's out of control. She really needs some guidance right now.
Yes. So that was incredible. And they just, then they said to me, there's going to take time for them to understand. I was like, understand what? And they say, understand that in the realm of the light, names are not needed.
Wow, because you're part of the whole. You're part of the connected.
Exactly.
So good.
So once you're connected with the whole, once you have that complete sense of totality, there's no description. This is the paradox of how we are made. Like when we think in the I am, it's like, oh, okay, I am my name, I am this, I am that. And no, you're none of that. And when you peel off all those layers of what you think you are, you arrive to a point where there's no name, where there's no description.
Yep. You're simply that presence.
Yeah.
Absolute presence. If you try to describe it, now it's not it anymore. So it's when the beings of light, and it's when I started to realize, I get, okay, there's different realms. There's something going on here. Because up to that point, there was a moment in my life when I would wake up and I didn't know if this was a dream.
And like, some would say this is the dream.
Yes. So I was like, where is that I'm dreaming? What is the truth?
Yeah.
What is reality?
Where is reality? Yeah.
So I was like, wandering between these two realms. And what happened after the near-death experience is my connection never broke. I kept a very high vibrational energy, and that's how I was able to always keep it going. Like you have a radio and the dial was set here, but it never went down. Yeah.
Yeah. I love how in the book you're constantly dropping in tidbits of information on your journey through your childhood, through your adult years, how when you're connecting with your beings of light, they're giving you information and you'll ask them questions and you're like, well, how's this work? And they'll like, I wrote this down. When you're with the whole, there's only one language. It's love. And talk about how they gave that to you and how that's really the overall arc of really what's going on here. It's all, the underlying theme is it's all about love. Yeah,
because when you think about it, it's like when they talk about us and we go to that part again of who I am. Who I am. So it's always this confusion of like how I get to the core of my being. Who's that I am?
Yeah.
And it's when they always kept bringing me to that part of like, what is that you most profoundly feel? What is that most profound connection of like, just realize it, just go back to it. And it was always that sense of joy, that sense of calmness, that sense of freedom, that sense of love. So that's what was the realization of all that. I would ask and I asked the beings of life, I was very little and I would just be like, I get it. What if tomorrow, what if today I have an accident and I lose the memory of who I am? So I am not Ingrid. I am not my career. I am not my name. I am not, because I forgot it all. But I am still. So what is that I am?
Oh, that's good.
What's that presence?
Is that presence? Yeah. Is that presence? And I had an experience just going back to love. When I had the near-death experience, I had the sense of dissolving in just totality, in wholeness. And this repeated a few times in my life, but now in a state of consciousness, just here. I mean, there I was conscious, but it was just here as Ingrid. I was one time in a bus, and when I was in this bus, I asked the beings of light, because I felt that I was an observer, and I asked them, what is that I am observing? And at that moment, the bus started to disintegrate, and I started to sense like the constituents of this bus. Like everything it was made of, all the organic, inorganic particles, like everything started to dissolve. Including me, everything. And at some point it was just light.
Oh, so you felt that energetic shift. And
yes.
And what is reality? I mean, if you come down to everything, it's all energy. We're like, this is real.
Exactly. And it's when I heard nothing is what it appears to be.
Yeah.
So I had two questions at that moment. How is it possible to forget what we truly are?
Yeah.
And when did we stop being one with the whole?
Oh, so good.
But then I have another question at that moment, because I was young. I was in my time where I wanted to be like everyone else, etc. And I said, why me? Why this is happening to me? And it's when they say, in 20 years, you will understand.
Yeah. And so you're like, I have to wait 20 years.
Like, what? So it's when, going back to what we were talking at the beginning in the book and everything, 20 years pass. And it's when I became like lower my frequency, became disconnected because now I wanted to follow my own path, and suffering happened.
Oh.
So it was 20 years of experiencing a lot of suffering. And 20 years later, like when I fell in that depression I mentioned at the beginning, just to tie the beginning of the conversation with this, and I ended up going to a psychologist. But it was the synchronistic events that happened to me to meet this guy were amazing. So I ended up there.
Was that the Dr. Guzman character in the book, or was that a different one?
No, this was another guy later in my life. And this was and he said to me, Ingrid, just write a list. And I never told him any of this because it was the time where I wasn't talking about this. Just like, he said, like, there's so many sufferings in your life that I think it will be very good if you write, because writing is very cathartic.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, writing. I wrote many science articles, books, but never about me. So it was like, okay, let's write. So the list went so long that when we wrote it together, he said, Ingrid, in my 20-something or 30-something years of practice, I have never, ever seen somebody that has suffered this much and is mentally stable.
Wow.
And I was like, I was in shock because I never thought I was the one that suffered the most or anything. Like, what? So I looked at him and I said, why me? And he said, this was the switch for me that changed everything. He said, why not?
Yeah.
Wow. At that moment, it's like all my neurons, all my connections, everything just started to connect. And I went to, why not? And he said, look, because of this happened because of this. And I just kept going like, but I also had some moment in which I realized I am none of that.
Yeah.
So you're finding the separation, even at that time, the character you're playing, this ego construct of Ingrid, you're finding that is a separate character from who the true you is.
So at that moment, I'm like, oh, yes, and I'm not none of that.
You even give presence in your book. I wrote down that when you're talking about the ego, I love the way this was defined. You were having a conversation with your beings of light. You said that the ego is the false idea that you're separate from God.
Yes.
Right there.
Yes.
You and God are of the same energy, the same presence.
The same presence.
And we think that God is a separate thing, and we have to pray, and we hope we're worthy enough to be with God. And if you follow a fear-based idea of religion, which I had, that I had to somehow be made worthy, and it was a punishment or reward at the end of your lifetime, then you're like, oh, I hope I'm good enough. But if you realize you came here from that presence and you're part of that presence, there's nothing you need to do to earn it. You're already there.
You're already there.
It allows you to experience all of this without the fear and without the worry that, it's not going to work out. In which I imagine at a young age when you found that out, because you talk about how you were in a church setting, and at some point you're just like, I'm out of here. You start talking to the people in the church and tell them, I don't think this is right.
I was like, this is not it. This is not it. And then after when this happened with this psychologist, I left this office and now I was in this state of, again, like coming back to what it was. And I was driving my car. And again, it was like, it's in the moments we least expected, like I was saying to you guys, because if we're living in the past in a memory, these things will not come. These moments happen when you're absolutely out of your head, when you're out of the way. And I was in the car and suddenly I was actually looking through the windshield and just thinking, wow, this is amazing. And at that moment, the same thing happened. The car just started to dissolve. And I felt that God was absolutely everything.
Boom.
There was nothing that wasn't God. The wheel, the car, my pores, every pore of my being, everything was God. There was nothing that was not Him.
I love it.
I think it's beautiful how you went through that space where you're like, no, I just want to be here. I want to experience kind of what everybody else has experienced. And you went through that dark night of the soul, right?
Yes.
And the appreciation now that you have when it like switched back on must have been so much better.
Yes, yes. And now you're mentioning it is now you come to a state of gratitude.
Yeah.
Absolute gratitude. Now I look back and I'm like, wow, this is incredible. This feels great. And also gratitude to know that everything that happened brought me the contrast I needed to be where I was today.
That's good.
So now I was at a state of like nothing ever happened to me. It happened for me.
Yeah.
So when I tied all the knots, even like the most terrifying and horrible things we could think that are horrible in our life, we're like, oh, this has purpose. And it's when the beings of light said to me, nothing in the universe lacks purpose.
Ooh, wow.
I agree.
I love it.
And it became so clear. So after this experience in the car, guys, it was like that going back to that sense of absolute love. And the same questions I had asked 20 years earlier came back. But now I got an answer. Because at this point of my life, there was not a why me anymore. Because now I knew I was worth it of everything.
Yeah. I love how in the book you give presence to the human dream that we're having, and you talk about the speck of dust and the vast universe, all a part of the oneness.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
as deep as you can go. How big is the universe and the stars and the solar systems and infinity and so forth? You can go down, and the electron is made of it's a particle of energy, and how far down can you get? A bacteria would view us as the universe.
As the universe, yeah, that's how I sense it. I was looking,
infinitely big and infinitely small.
Yeah, I would be looking through the microscope and seeing like the communities of phytoplankton and say, oh, for these communities, I am the universe.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
So it's amazing how, it's at all levels.
Yeah.
So I have an experience recently that goes with all these, but with going to that back to that sense of love. I reached this state of like I would go and drink a glass of water and I'm drinking love because everything is God.
So beautiful.
So if everything is God, it just everything. Now you still at you are at this sense of like. There's grace in everything.
You even talk about that. I wrote that down, how appreciation and gratitude is how you get to unconditional love. And unconditional love is the highest vibration.
The highest vibration there is. So now you're just navigating and that's what we are. And even though like we are in this process and we can just reach all these states of clarity and awareness, we still have the moments where we're like, keep questioning and tripping and questioning. And lately, I just had one of these moments where I was like, and I had I call it like a spiritual crisis. And it was happening. And I said, how I go back to self. But what happened is this bring you to ask questions.
Yeah.
So any time that we're being disturbed, that we're being moved, is the way of the universe. I always say life is a conversation of God having to us, with us.
Yeah.
And then these things happen for us to be shaken and like get out of the comfort and ask the next question. So I'm like, how I go back to self?
Oh, that's good.
And I was sitting there and this was incredible, guys, because it was like, I was sitting there and suddenly I thought, okay, let's go back to self. Then I realized we're always thinking about self, Ingrid, the body, this space, this. And the I dissolved. There was no more sense of I. Because self is not this. Self is the totality of everything.
I love it. It's that beingness, that sense of beingness.
That sense of, exactly. So now like, self is absolutely everything. That's why when they came and say to you, there's nothing outside of yourself, of course there's nothing outside of yourself, because self is everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's when we realize you and I, there's not you and I.
Right.
There's only oneness, because there's nothing that really, I now say what separates us is a little membrane.
Yeah.
And once we realize that that's just that little idea,
Yeah.
then that dissolves. And it was incredible, because right before that I had this vision, and I saw a book, and the cover of the book had the letter I. And when I opened the book was empty. And it was a huge book, and it was pages of pages, and nothing was written on it. So I'm like, what is this? And it's when I received the message, without the paper cannot be written words.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Without the canvas cannot be
Yeah.
a paint.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So without the essence of who you are, none of these could be.
I like how you have the
Wonderful.
big S for self, and that's just the self experiencing it. Then you have the little s. Well, this is myself. You know, the gender, the ethnicity, the things that you like and don't like to make up this ego construct. But when you let those things go and you realize really you're part of the true essence, the universal consciousness of the self.
And the beautiful thing is that self includes everything and it excludes nothing.
Yeah.
So when I look at somebody with the eyes of like, oh, I am already denying myself. Because there's nothing outside of ourselves. Yeah. We're the totality of everything.
Yeah. Now, you talk about growing up in Colombia as your childhood began to progress, and at some point, then you end up in the United States later in your life. How has growing up in Colombia changed, or how has it made your life path the way it is, having a different culture and then now seeing different places around the world? How did that affect your life?
I think it has been great. I mean, the path I chose for career was incredible because it allowed me to see the world. I've been in about 56 countries in the world. And it was incredible because wherever I was not just bringing science, but spirituality. And I was establishing connections, and I was realizing, wow, I can speak with people at so many levels.
Yeah.
And I was going on oceanographic cruises all over the place and seeing, I can talk to the person that is even doing the dishes. And it doesn't have to be always so difficult that they cannot reach you. Even talking about science, we can always do it at a level that the person can connect with us, and we can establish these incredible connections with people. But answering to your question, growing back in Colombia was really hard because when I was growing up, Colombia was a country at war. And Colombia has been fighting a war for I don't know, 60, 70 years, an internal war.
As the foreword of the book, Mike's writing about how you had seen more war than he had seen, and he was a military professional. So
yes. So it was really hard because we grew up with bombs exploding everywhere and having to have that awareness that you were not safe anywhere you were, and then there was a lot of people that have to go from the rural areas to the cities, and that made the cities even more dangerous because it was people with no jobs. So the crime was really high. So I grew up in the middle of this crazy, stressful environment.
Yeah, you even talk about how you were potentially going to be attacked by someone.
Oh, there's so many times that I got, attacked. Actually, there's an incredible story we can bring here, which is a story where I went to this amazing place to do some snorkeling. This was this paradise beach. So that's the really even sad part, because you're experiencing this contrast where you feel in paradise, but now you're facing the possibility of getting destroyed. So we went to this beach, didn't think anything, and it was this incredible place for diving, and it was this place where there was many beaches, but they were like surrounded by cliffs. So to go from one place to another, you sometimes have to go in the water a little. So it was kind of hard to cross from one place to another, but we managed to go to a few places, and this was incredible. And at the time I was with somebody I was dating. And when we were about to come back, we just said, oh, let's sit here and look at this beach is so beautiful. Now, okay, we made the decision to come back. And when we were about to cross to the other beach, 3 men appeared just like a big surprise there. I'm like, oh. But at some point, I guess I just thought, okay, they're just locals. Because they look like locals.
Hey,
but,
guys, how you doing?
Hey, hi.
Right.
But I had the feeling.
Oh, boy.
Oh.
Like, And yeah, I was right. At that moment, they pushed us back. They were tall, strong. They pushed us back to the beach, and they started to take everything from us.
Wow.
And they took all our things, and they tied the guy I was dating with some ropes, and they had knives and a piece of glass cutting almost his neck. And I never thought about anything further they were going to do to us, but when they started to tie him and they tied my hands, he started to scream, leave her alone. You already have our things, just leave her alone. At that moment I realized, oh Lord, this is getting really bad. And I was looking, imagine this scene, this was a horror. It was a moment of absolute panic. But then I turned my head towards the ocean because I didn't want to see how they were about to cut his neck. And when I turned my head and I saw the beautiful horizon, the sun, the light, the reflection of the sun in the water, boom, that always worked for me, the water. My vibration and energy went high. And I connected with the beings of light. And at that moment, I was like, wow. And I didn't know how completely free of fear I was from death. Because I know death doesn't really exist. And at that moment, when I reached that very high frequency, the first thought that came to my mind was, this is a good day to die.
Wow.
So I completely surrendered. Like, and when this happened, one of the guys came and he pushed me to the ground. But I was at a state of no thought, no fear.
Mm-hmm.
I was completely free from any sense of I was going to be harmed. None of that. Because it's when you reach that sense of like, nothing can truly harm me. You can harm this.
Yeah.
You cannot harm who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good.
So when I was in the ground, the guy lied on top of me. He was about 200 pounds and I couldn't even feel his weight. And my hands were tied. And somehow, guys, I freed my hand. And the guy was on top of me and he was already with his hand down here. And his head was looking down, and I freed his hand and I grabbed his face. And I put his face up directly, looking directly to my eyes. And imagine, this is a moment where you should be in horror. And I just told the guy, this coming out of my mouth, it was like, dear, don't do this to me. And he pushed and jumped like a coil. At that split of a second, there was oneness. There was the connection of that. None of this is what it is.
Wow.
So it's incredible how, that's why I mentioned gratitude, how when we realize that everything has a purpose, even the most horrendous experience brought me to experience what true oneness is. It goes beyond anything.
Mm-hmm.
So was that truly my enemy?
Yeah.
Or just that split of awakening I needed at that moment? So the guy just pushed, and he said to the other ones, we're leaving. And they didn't even hesitate. They followed what he said. And I stood up and I untied him and I said to him, we have to go because they're coming back. And where are we going? Because that side was the place where they left, and this was a cliff and there was no way to pass to the next place. And I said, we're climbing. And we were young, in a good shape, and we climbed this cliff. Mm. And once at the top, I said, lower yourself down because they're coming. Because, of course, the guy had that moment of clarity of knowing who he truly was, but it went away.
Yep.
All the heaviness of
that low vibration.
That we have all our conditioning, everything came back.
Yeah.
So they came back looking for us. And at that moment, he held my hand and he's like, how did you know that they were coming back? Mm-hmm. But I wasn't talking about that at the time.
You're like, do you know who I am? Right. I'm connected with beings of light. In fact, I am a being of light. Let me tell you more.
And no, with this boyfriend, no. So it just was like, I just knew. But after that, I mean, the experience was such. And then we had to walk with. They left us with nothing, just the bikini. They took our clothes, our shoes, everything, and we had to walk through all these bushes and turns and everything until we arrived to the road, and these divers picked us up, and we were in such a bad shape. Wow. Because it was a long way to get to the road and all that. And after that, we went to the police and they said how lucky we were because they were looking for the people that have been already committed few murders in this beach. And they say, we would have known you guys were going there, we would have stopped you, but they couldn't really keep an eye on everybody. Yeah. So it's when this person I was dating at the time, he wasn't into any of that, but of like awareness, nothing. But after this, I said to him, if you never believed in guardian angels or in protective forces, then now is the time. And he's like, this changed his life.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So it's getting back to being that authentic you.
Every time it happened,
right?
It kept bringing back to, this is the truth of who I am. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is the truth of who I am. But we resist a lot, and I was fighting it hard. And it's incredible because the first teaching I ever got was like, let yourself rest in the hands of the divine guidance.
Oh, so good. Just resting into that, just releasing into that, surrendering into that.
Let yourself be. And when I had the near-death experience and I saw flowers blooming from nowhere and I was picked up, it was that sense of you are being done. Mm-hmm. You're not doing anything.
Yeah. You know, that's making me remember the Dr. Guzman character that you have in the book. You did some hypnotherapy sessions with him.
Yeah.
And talk about the respiratory and the past life connection, how you made that. Because that's, a lot of people are like, are past lives real? I'm like, it's a cosmic thing. Yeah. Your life is a little chapter in this cosmic journey that you're having. Yeah.
It's just a little, after all these and the experience in the beach and all that, is just when I have the absolute clarity. This is just a dress. Mm-hmm. This is just a shell.
Yeah.
That's a costume.
And this is just a continuation. It's just a continuum. So in the experience with the doctor was because I went to this hypnosis event and I started to get really interested in, because in the hypnosis event, something happened that I stayed, this is cool. Mm-hmm. So after that, I wanted to know more about it, and I visit. Actually, the first psychologist I visit, we went into hypnosis, and he started to ask me questions like, what should we ask? Well, okay. We went into this whole hypnosis. I wanted to know about my health and all that. And suddenly we were in the whole thing, and I didn't see myself. I started to see the life of this doctor.
Oh.
And I was like, and I saw him as a child, and I said, you have these traumas that come from childhood. I didn't even know this person. This was the first time ever I met this guy. And he said like, what? And I said, shh, I need to talk to you about yourself.
Oh my.
And he started to listen because, wow, of course, he was interested in all this. And I started to tell him, like, you had a problem in your mouth. It was a deformity. And all this being correct and almost we cannot see it, you still cover your mouth when you laugh. He's like, how you could possibly know these things? And I said, but it's time. It's time to let all this go.
Yeah.
So I was the one that ended up doing therapy to him.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
You never know.
You never
You know,
know.
we never know what it is, you know, and it's just important to be you.
Yes.
Again, if you
Yeah.
were authentically you, you wouldn't have been able to help him.
Yes. So it's when he sent me to Dr. Guzman because he was working with past life experiences and he thought this was incredible how this girl did this. So he sent me to this doctor. I was like 18, 19 years old when that happened. And
Who's this little girl telling me all this stuff?
yes.
Yeah.
So I went
Yeah.
to see this doctor who was studying all this and was like seeing many people and diving into all this. And I went to this hypnosis again and I asked about my health. And I was born with respiratory problems. And all my life, I had some bronchitis, I had some asthma, I had, just name it. Anything that was related with my respiratory system happened from the day I was born in this life until I was 19. Then we were there and I asked again like about my health. And suddenly I started to experience a sense of being absolutely freezing cold. It was so cold that I was shaking. And I went back to the time where I was born in this life. And how cold this room was. And from there, I jumped back. And in the book, I only mentioned one life, but I started to see different lives in which I died from some harm to my respiratory system. And one of those lives, it was a spear or a sword that went through my lungs. And I actually, it's incredible because like in the drowning in the tank, in that life, I actually drowned in my own blood.
Whoa.
And when I started to see all this, and in another life, I died from tuberculosis. And I think the one I mentioned in the book was I was in a dungeon.
Yeah, you said you were a religious character that had stood up for your beliefs during the Inquisitions. Yeah.
So we go back to repeat the same things. Yeah. So in that time, I was put in the prison. It was a dungeon. It actually was in Italy. And I was in this hole pretty much where only my feet could be. And it was some bars like that. And I was almost naked in this hole and I died there from hunger and illness. And so I was actually praying for the moment of my death to come. And I died from some, imagine the cold, everything, probably some tuberculosis, who knows. And wow. When I came back from all these, we did few sessions, but when I came back from this very first time, I said to him, this has been so hard, but it's giving me clarity. And from that day on, I healed.
I believe that is one of the most powerful things when people are dealing with those type of things. I have had it happen for me because I came in with problems with my legs, with problems with my knees, knee surgeries when I was in middle school, always having to deal with it. And I was finally taken into that place, into a past life where my legs were crushed from my knees down.
Yeah. And
I mean, I went so deeply into that space, I could feel my legs were not there. And I mean, it was a panic moment because it was so, I was there. And it's like once I was brought out of that and realized what happened, I don't have the problems I used to have.
Yes, you don't have it anymore. Once you have awareness, once you have clarity, that's another thing I write in the book. And the beings of light said to me, once you know, once you come to that clarity, you feel that sense of relief. Now that's the sense of love. Now when you know you love, you change your perception towards it. Now like you get it, it's clear. And from there forgiveness comes. Which is, there's many levels of forgiveness, but the true forgiveness, the deepest forgiveness of all, is to know that nothing ever been done to hurt you, but to guide you to awareness, to guide you to awakening, to guide you to open your eyes.
Yeah, that's so much better of a narrative when we're here to have these experiences. And even those things that are, we would say, are a bad experience or a negative experience. You talk about how you are speaking with the beings of light, and they're like, there's no good or bad. They're just experiences that happen to you. And they kind of give presence to that.
Yes.
Talk about how you've integrated things that happen. I mean, there's things that are irritating. A tire's flat, or, there's some bill that has to be paid. Those are all those 3D things that we have, but really it's no good or bad. Talk about that.
There's none of that. Actually, the beings of light said there's only universal goodness. If we need to find a word to express it, is everything that actually is happening is to guide us, is to move us, is to bring us to the realization of something. It brings us to ask questions. I put the example of the bird in the nest.
Yes.
So there's a little bird there in the nest, all happy. Now mom brings food. I am so comfortable. This is paradise. So now what happened? The mom realized, okay, he's in age. I'm not bringing more food. First challenge. Now, depending on how you're now learning to see the world, you can fall into the victimhood of, my mom is bad.
Yes.
She doesn't love me.
Oh, boy.
She's not feeding me.
The stories we tell ourselves.
The stories. And now we create the story. Okay. Now, this nest is small, stinky, because the bird spoiled the nest. And all this discomfort, all this challenge come to our life, and we could see it as bad. This is all bad. But what happened when now all this push you to jump out of the nest and realize, I can fly.
Fly,
if I didn't leave, if all this discomfort didn't happen, there would never been a reason for me to leave this nest, for me to realize I have wings and I can fly.
Yeah, so many times somebody will say, oh, I lost my job. And somebody else will tell them, oh, congratulations. That means you're being moved to do a new thing.
To do something
a
else.
New experience.
Exactly. So, and I leave it that way. Now I say people just practice awareness. Like I was talking to you guys, I do a walking meditation. But it's what I do is like when I meditate, it's not like, sometimes it's like the idea that people say just to cut with your ego or go somewhere else, or I don't know, be in this state of being somewhere else. No, it's like I do it is with the purpose of like how I bring myself to complete awareness. And how I live a life where all I'm doing it with a conscious mind.
Yeah, you were telling us and sharing how you just bring yourself into a complete presence. And if you don't achieve it, you go until you achieve it.
Yes.
And that was beautiful.
Yes. And when we live our life like this, you can be in the bank doing the line and oh, now it's all these people here. You don't feel that anymore because you realize this is all part of life. And now you start realizing that you see the experience I have recently when I told you guys that I had the sense of, wow, self is the totality of everything. It was the first time that I saw the perfection in everything.
Wow.
That's, wow.
Everything is like, you're perfect.
Mm.
You're perfect.
Yeah.
This is perfect. This situation is perfect. Everything is absolutely perfect.
That is a challenge for me when I look at the drama of American politics. That is a challenge for me. It's perfect. Oh, okay, I'm being challenged right now by that.
Yeah, and there's certain things I also think that if it's disturbing us too much, then we should change that channel, move to something else. Because the moment that it doesn't disturb you anymore, you realize that you're already past it.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So I just said to people, don't stay in that drama, because it's up to us. I said to people, suffering is a matter of choice. Challenge will always be there. That's different. But I can make the decision of taking that challenge and create a story and become a victim of my story, or move on. Like you have this path that it just opens like that. I can make the decision of take the path of poor me.
Yeah.
I am a victim.
Yeah.
I stay here and it's a cul-de-sac. No way to go.
Nowhere to go. I love that.
Or I can take the path of like, you know what? What is this teaching me?
Yeah.
I go to God and I said, God, look, I know you have this huge plan that I don't understand. I'm too little to get it. We're thinking about even the politicians. There's a bigger plan that I cannot even understand. So please help me see the good on this.
Yeah, that's
Because I can't.
awesome. Yeah.
Help me see the good on this. Help me see the teaching on this. Even the little video of it, and I can just move on and drop this story.
Yeah.
So when I know that everything in my life is bringing good, but everything in my life is bringing a teaching, is bringing me somewhere else to change, to new realization, to evolution, then it's just gratefulness.
Yeah, you talk about coming out of victimhood and becoming a co-creator of your reality.
Yes.
I love that. In the book, okay, so this just stuck out like crazy. I read this to Gail this morning. You had a special connection with your grandmother, and she was someone who kind of was a safe space for spirituality for you, because you're like, oh, I don't know about the organized religion that we're involved with. And your grandma's like, look, there's some other things. And so she was a really important mentor of yours. And I like how when you're talking with your grandma, you're talking about how death is a part of life, and you clearly understood everything grandma was saying. What's really important to this phrase that was here is one of the most profound spiritual experiences I have personally had have been in an ayahuasca ceremony. And I felt I was connected into universal consciousness. And my very first experience when I go into this deep meditative state in the medicine is I see in red neon writing, it says, enjoy the ride. And I say, well, what does that mean? And I say, she being the madre, the ayahuasca madre, she says, that's why you're here. You're here to enjoy the ride. And that was my very first experience in that meditative medicine. And so when I'm reading this chapter, this sentence here, it's on page 51 if you want to follow along. It says, I already knew everything grandmother was saying, and I wasn't afraid of death because I knew it wasn't the end. However, I wasn't interested in being part of this cycle anymore. And then grandma says to me, time is meaningless if we learn to enjoy the ride with every breath. And I went, ugh, there's that universal consciousness. So even in something that you've written some time back, you still have the ability to connect other people with another message and something that just comes along and you hear this and it's enforced. And when I'm going through a tough time or I'm struggling with something, I remember we're here to enjoy the ride. That's what this is about.
To enjoy the ride. I say to people, this can be an amazing journey.
Yeah.
If we learn to enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
So like if we go out to an amusement park and now you know that I can pick the rides that I want to take.
Oh, it's good.
Right, because if you don't and you just kind of are afraid and you're like gripping and you don't want to be there, you're not going to enjoy it.
You're not going to enjoy it,
Right.
exactly. Now you're or if you're following or you're doing what others want you to do, because that's the other part of us, how I please others.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So in pleasing others, we abandon ourselves.
You're living an inauthentic life.
Yes. So this always brings us back, like you were saying, like only in the moment when I completely, all this happened, the experience in the car happened, all this happened, and I started to go back to be myself. And the beings of light guided me to my best friend nowadays. Her name is Lana. And they said to me, you can tell her everything. You're ready.
Oh, yeah.
And when I was really, and she was open. And we talked together for 4 years at lunchtime, every single day at the NASA cafeteria. And it was all about spirituality. And it's when I also came to the realization, this path don't meant to be for doing it yourself.
Yeah.
We are all connected.
Yes.
Yeah.
And only through the connections, like with my grandma, like the beings of light said to me, there will be people in your path to help you.
Okay, now I want to give presence to your work because you just dropped a little tidbit of information. NASA. Yeah, you work for NASA.
Right.
And I remember in your book you talk about you had a kind of a premonition, a vision of the future where you were told the beings of light, like, hey, you're going to be working at NASA, and you didn't even know what that was at the time. So you have, you're super smart. You've studied oceanography. You studied mangroves.
Marine biologist, right?
You are a marine biologist. You are a scuba diver, which I'm passionate about. I too am a scuba diver. Give presence to the PhD program that your 3D character is playing here, and how you're raising consciousness with that, and how you are a part of moving forward and helping take care of even the littlest things, and how climate change and give presence to the work that you're doing.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because I think that's the part where I had the struggle growing up, always thinking, how can I be a spiritual being in this world?
Yeah.
How can I mix the spirituality with my secular life? Nowadays we have the absolute clarity when I'm sitting right now, like they're not separate at all.
Yes.
We create that separation in the mind.
Yeah.
Yes.
Then when I started to do my work, I started to introduce that, who I was in everything I did.
Mm-hmm.
So incredibly, I was picked up or I guess connected with people that were working with projects that were to bring conscious awareness to people about the use of our resources.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to work very strongly with that. And I wanted to remind people that we are not separated from nature. We are nature.
Yes.
Yes.
And what happens is, if you don't feel that ownership, if you don't feel this planet is my home here, and this, what I'm doing, destroying and aggravating and polluting and doing all this, is going to be feel and is going to be sensed and is going to danger and impair the future of my family, my grandkids, my future generations. So it is involving us all.
Yeah.
So we forgot that we are nature, starting from there.
Yeah, I was given a religious narrative saying that I was somehow superior, and the earth and all of its elements would burn away, and I'd go up to the glory place and whatever, and there'd be a new heaven and a new earth. And I'm like, well, what if that's a belief system, and what if the reality is that we're all here to be part of this growing consciousness?
What if heaven is here and now?
What if this is it? Yeah, and our stewardship and responsibilities to take care of it.
Well,
what is in one is in the whole. So really, we're only harming ourselves by not paying attention to those things.
So the beautiful thing was like working with the communities, not with the idea of prohibition, because from that nothing comes. It was with the idea of like how we use these resources in the way that is sustainable, in a way that we are being part of it, in a way that your future generations will be using these, because you're not destroying it. And we brought them to the awareness. We showed them maps. We brought them to the places. There's amazing pictures here of the resource being destroyed, and they were not aware of. They knew it was getting smaller and that the mangroves were dying, but they didn't realize that it was because they were damaging it to this point. So we worked with the communities and we started to create this consciousness. And they started to grow, and we started to have these greenhouses and work together. And that's what I have trying to do with all my work with science, is how I bring consciousness to the mind of people and make them realize we're not separated from nature. And after that, I continue working with projects involving red tides and showing people the amount of nutrients that we were like disposing to the rivers and the oceans, and how this is creating all these imbalance in the system. And I started to work with climate variability and became an expert in El Nino phenomenon. So with all these always, and just wrote this other book that was just bringing people to this knowledge, what these phenomena are, what is happening in the ocean. I started to work with regional bioindicators of El Nino phenomenon and show, look, this is happening more. And the planet is in just reaching this imbalance. So it's incredible how I say to people, nothing is outside of ourselves. So even when somebody talking about nature, talking about climate change, talking about war, people come and ask me, but I am just this one here. What can I do to solve the problems of the world? And I go back and say, everything.
Yeah, that's the cop out we all have. Well, what's one more vote going to be? What's it matter if I recycle my one water bottle? We all think the little thing, but if we're all doing the little thing, we're changing consciousness.
Exactly. Exactly. The day I become aware that I am absolutely important, that I am that piece of the puzzle, that without it the puzzle is not complete, then I can do everything to change the problems of the world. I say the day you become at peace within yourself, the peace in the world will end. The peace, the war will end, and the peace will prevail. Another thing, and the work was not just about doing things, but about being who you are again. Because there was a point that I asked the beings of light. It was a moment where I'm like, but I am here. And I am surrounded by all these people that don't even believe all these things. I think, why am I here with this in this scientific world? And the answer was amazing. Because I asked, what should I do or say to them? And they said to me, do or say nothing. The light of your awareness is all they need.
Oh, wow.
They say, all the doing is within yourself. Just be. Be who you are. So it's going back to your authentic self.
That's good.
Be who you are, and the world around will do its thing. So we are that pillar of peace, of love, of kindness, of compassion. If we go back to be who we truly are, love, the energy of God, then we're already doing the work.
I love it. In closing, you do a lot of work with speaking and teaching, and give some presence to what you're currently doing, some of the current things you're doing. Your book is brilliant. I really encourage you to pick up a copy of this. This is a really good read, and there's so many tidbits. You're going to love reading this. Give us some presence to what you're working on now.
Now these doors have completely open for me right now. And all that fear that I had is gone. Look, guys, there was a couple of years ago, I couldn't even talk about this. The words wouldn't come out of me. I was in such fear. So I'm bringing to people that sense of like openness, how we can open ourselves and go from being in to now being together, being that giver, establishing those deeper connections and knowing that we are all one. And the work I'm doing, I'm just starting with all these. I'm creating YouTube videos.
Yeah.
I went to the IANS conference last year. I went to the Afterlife Awareness Conference, and with all the videos and the book, I even told the beings, so I told God, please make it slow. I don't want to be overwhelmed.
Make it easy for me.
And it's been incredible because it's been a process. So with all the conferences and the videos, I started to have, this is great because, again, going back to the book, when I said like, okay, if just 3 people read the book, that means that I did a good job.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's all good. And I started to receive like hundreds of emails.
Ooh.
And hundreds of messages and people from, so I actually created in my website, I do like sessions where I talk to people who think it could be like their spiritual transformative experience that they have and they don't want to talk to anybody else. They're fearful about doing it. Mm-hmm. Then I get people contacting me and talking about these things, about their near-death experience, about anything like how they can free themselves from being victim, how they can free themselves from being fearful, how they can go back to love. I get all kind of things, all kind of people, all of them incredible people. Mm-hmm. And so I'm doing that too. I'm doing these sessions, and we usually do Skype or whatever they feel better. Some people don't want to be seen, so we just do phone. Mm. And now I am also part of something that IANS is doing. It's called EaseGo, which is like IANS online. It's like an online group that people can connect online and talk about their experiences. And this is really beautiful. It's just a project that is starting and is with the idea to offer people the possibility to have a safe place where they can come and talk. So I'm involved in all this, and with this I started to receive calls of like, oh, you want to do this interview? And I'm like, okay. And this other thing and this other thing. And I have reached the point where this year I have something booked for every single month almost.
Wow.
Like I'm going to different places. I've been invited. There are people, you have to come. Please come and talk in our group. Please come and talk
How
here.
exciting.
So it's beautiful. Yes.
Yeah.
It's so important though for people like you to do that, because what I've seen when we've gone to the Afterlife conferences is how important it is for people to know who have had that experience and have all of these things that happen to them that they just don't know what to do with.
Yeah.
And being able to integrate them back into society with that veil being thinned and them having these other experiences is huge for those people. And for us, it was like hearing and reading all these stories, realizing there's more to this world that we necessarily haven't seen in the way that somebody who's had a near-death experience has seen it, but it like gave us this peace and calming that it's not a hell that we're going to. It's not heaven or hell, and that's heaven and hell is down there and we're going to suffer. Yeah. It just completely wiped all of that out for us and gave us probably the biggest peace on our spiritual journey that we've ever had.
Yeah. Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. Near-death experiences are the single most important thing that got me out of the fear of the religious mindset to go, oh, wait a minute, that's just a belief system. Now I got to hear people like yourself and many of these stories where people just talked about, that none of that stuff, that religious context is an earth mythology. None of it happens when you die. It's totally different. And I was like, tell me more.
Yes. Imagine when I was just a little child and I would just say, how I could have seen my body lifeless if I was alive.
Yeah.
Right.
More alive than ever.
Yeah, I was dead, but I wasn't dead. I was still there. So how can that be? People have those.
Yeah. This is another beautiful thing before we leave, but it was like when I asked the beings of light why this happened when I was so little. They said, because you were all enough to remember, but young enough not to be conditioned yet.
Oh, that's great.
That's really good.
So they said everything has purpose, remember.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And someday we can talk about this other thing, but they explained to me later all the details of my near-death experience, the purpose in everything.
Mm.
Wow.
So it's like when we get to that clarity and we realize, yes, there's a bigger plan that we don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
But everything is like this, like needing something, like doing something, that sweater, it is the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a thread that is out of place or something, that it would not be
Yeah.
perfect as it is. So everything is happening for a reason, and everything has a purpose, and there's only universal goodness. Is God in everything.
Beautiful.
So good. Give
Beautiful.
presence
Thank
to
you.
your website and how people can contact you.
Yeah, my website is ingridhonkala.com. And I am also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Just trying to just be there. Just be there, reachable. So people can, and every day I'm putting these like inspiring quotes so people can have a little bit of the joy of the day.
That's so good.
Very good.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. Thanks for stopping in while your journey was around. When I had talked to Mel, she said, oh, she's in a totally different state. I was like, well, tell her if she ever comes to Phoenix, that would be great to talk with her. And sure enough, you're in Phoenix. This is amazing. So
this is incredible. Yeah. And it was, this is amazing because there was few instances that I thought I wouldn't come, and I was guided to come, and I was guided to come, and it was like, no, you will be there. To the point that actually even the day today, the 9 was told.
That's right.
Like the 9, it will happen, and you guys leaving tomorrow, so it was like this is going to happen today. So
perfect. Oh, I love it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This is an honor.
Well, I know that you've done some of the yogic tradition, so in the yogic tradition, I would say to you, Namaste.
Namaste. Or like the Mayans say, In Lakesh, which means I am you.
And then you would return and say, Alakim.
Alakem.
Alakem. You are me.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us here on Exploring the Human Journey. You can find us as a video on YouTube or listen to us as a podcast. You can also join in the conversation by following us on Facebook and Instagram. For more information, go to the website at exploringthehumanjourney.com.